She gets nothing. Those 3 words echoed through the attorney's office as my sister Amanda slammed her hand on the mahogany table. Her diamond rings caught the light, glinting like her triumphant smile. It's exactly what she deserves. I sat frozen in my chair, watching as the family attorney nodded and began to close his briefcase. 27 years of being invisible, of being the family disappointment, had culminated in this moment. My own father had left me out of his will entirely. But then the attorney reached for one more envelope. "Actually," he said quietly, "there's something else that needs to be addressed." No one, least of all me, could have predicted what happened next. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Emily Winters. For most of my life, that name might as well have been Amanda's sister, or the other one. I grew up in Cedar Falls, a picture-perfect New England town with white church steeples and maple trees that blazed crimson every fall. Our family home was a sprawling colonial on Sycamore Drive, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a 3-car garage housing my father's prized vintage Corvette. I wish I could say my childhood was as idyllic as the town we lived in, but that would be a lie. My father, Richard Winters, was the founder of Winters Financial Group, the largest investment firm in 3 counties. My mother, Diane, was a former beauty queen who chaired every important committee in town. And my older sister, Amanda, was their crowning achievement, beautiful, poised, and ruthlessly determined to maintain her position as the center of attention. I, on the other hand, was the family enigma, the quiet, bookish daughter who preferred the library to the country club. I had my father's analytical mind, but none of his cutthroat ambition. I had my mother's artistic sensibilities, but none of her social graces. In our family's carefully curated narrative, I simply didn't fit. "Emily, must you always slouch?" My mother would sigh during the rare family dinners when my father wasn't working late. "And that sweater, couldn't you have worn something more flattering? The Hendersons are coming over later." Amanda would smirk from across the table, elegant in whatever designer outfit my mother had bought her that week. At 17, she already had the confident poise of someone who knew her place in the world was secured. "Leave her alone, Mom," she'd say in a tone that sounded defensive but was laced with condescension. "Emily's just different. Different." That word followed me through our echoing hallways, whispered behind cupped hands at family gatherings, exchanged in knowing glances between my parents when I chose books over ballet, science over socializing, substance over style. The contrast between Amanda and me was stark and deliberate. Her bedroom was a showcase of achievement, trophies, ribbons, framed certificates covering every surface. Mine was painfully bare in comparison, not because I hadn't achieved anything, but because my accomplishments were never quite worthy of display. The academic decathlon medal gathering dust in my drawer didn't shine as brightly as Amanda's homecoming queen crown. "Your sister is going places," my father would announce to anyone who would listen. "Harvard Business School, then straight into the firm. She's got the Winters instinct." No one asked where I might be going. It was assumed I would find some quiet path, something suitably unobtrusive that wouldn't reflect poorly on the family name, but wouldn't outshine the golden child either. The only person who ever really saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor Winters. Unlike her son, my father, Grandma Ellie believed that strength could be quiet, that intelligence didn't need to announce itself, and that kindness was never a weakness. She lived in a modest cottage on the outskirts of town. Surrounded by gardens, she tended herself despite my father's repeated offers to hire a landscaper. "Why would I pay someone to do what brings me joy?" she'd ask, soil under her fingernails, and contentment on her face. I spent every moment I could at Grandma Ellie's cottage. While Amanda was being groomed for country club membership and corporate leadership, I was learning how to graft roses and balance account books at my grandmother's kitchen table. Your father thinks money is power, she told me once as we sorted through her household expenses. She was meticulous about her finances despite being comfortable wealthy from her late husband's investments. But real power is understanding the difference between what you want and what you need. I was 16 when she first showed me her investment portfolio. Unlike my father, who chased aggressive returns and took calculated risks, Grandma Ellie had built a diverse, steady portfolio focused on long-term stability rather than flashy gains. Richard thinks I'm too conservative, she confided. But I've weathered 3 major market crashes without losing sleep. Can he say the same? Those quiet afternoons in her sunroom, learning about dividend stocks and municipal bonds, shaped me more than all my years of formal education. Grandma Ellie taught me that wealth wasn't about displaying it, but about managing it wisely. She showed me that financial independence was the foundation of all other freedoms. Always have your own money, Emily, she'd say firmly. Never put yourself in a position where you have to choose between your dignity and your dinner. When it came time for college, Amanda followed the prescribed path to Harvard, where my father's generous alumni donations had smoothed her admission, despite her less-than-stellar academic record. I chose the state university's finance program instead, not because we couldn't afford a private school. Money was never the issue in our family, but because I wanted to succeed or fail on my own merits. My father's disappointment was palpable. A state school? After all the advantages you've had? He shook his head, unable to comprehend why I would choose a path with less prestige. At least Amanda understands the value of connections. What he never understood was that I had made the most valuable connection of all, the one with Grandma Ellie, who taught me to think for myself. College was liberating. Away from Amanda's shadow and my parents' disapproving glances, I flourished. My analytical mind, so out of place in our status-conscious home, found purpose in the complex world of financial planning. I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from several prestigious firms, none of which were my father's. I chose a position with Meridian Advisors in Boston, specializing in retirement planning for educators and healthcare workers. My father couldn't understand why I'd want to work with clients of modest means when I could be managing wealth for the top 1% at Winters Financial. Those people can barely afford financial advisors, he scoffed during one of our increasingly rare phone conversations. That's exactly why they need good ones, I replied. Not everyone has a trust fund to fall back on. For 5 years, I built my career in Boston, carefully establishing myself as Emily Winters' financial advisor, not Richard Winters' daughter. I rented a small but sunny apartment in Cambridge, made friends who knew nothing about my family's status in Cedar Falls, and even dated occasionally, though none of the relationships stuck. There was something in me that still held back, some part that couldn't quite believe anyone would choose me if Amanda were standing nearby. Meanwhile, Amanda had indeed gone straight from Harvard Business School into the family firm, where she was fast-tracked to management despite lacking the financial instincts that had made our father successful. What she lacked in skill, however, she made up for in ambition and charisma. Clients loved her confidence and polish, never realizing that her investment advice came primarily from the analysts working behind the scenes. Our lives might have continued on these separate tracks indefinitely if not for Grandma Ellie's sudden stroke. The call came on a Tuesday morning as I was preparing for a client meeting. "Emily, it's your mother." Her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. "Grandma Ellie is in the hospital. It doesn't look good." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I was in my car within the hour, racing the 3 hours back to Cedar Falls with my heart in my throat. The hospital was a modern facility on the edge of town, built largely with donations from wealthy families like ours. My mother and father were already there when I arrived, standing stiffly in the corridor outside the ICU. "Where's Amanda?" I asked after hugging my mother briefly. "She's trying to finish up an important client meeting," my father answered. She'll be here as soon as she can. Of course. Even now, the family business took precedence. Grandma Ellie lay small and fragile beneath the hospital sheets, her vibrant spirit dimmed by machines and tubes. I sat beside her, holding her hand, gently between mine, careful not to disturb the IV. The doctors had been clear. The stroke had been catastrophic. She wouldn't be returning to her cottage or her beloved gardens. "I'm here, Grandma," I whispered, though I wasn't sure she could hear me. "I'm not going anywhere." True to my word, I didn't leave her side for the next 3 days. I worked remotely from her hospital room, stepping into the hallway for client calls, sleeping in the uncomfortable visitor's chair despite my parents' insistence that I could go home and get some proper rest. Amanda visited once, breezing, in with a bouquet of expensive flowers and the latest family news, as if Grandma Ellie were merely resting rather than slipping away. She stayed for precisely 45 minutes before checking her watch and announcing she had to get back to the office. "Some of us have responsibilities, Emily," she said pointedly when I refused to join the family for dinner that evening. "You can't just abandon your life indefinitely." But Grandma Ellie had never abandoned me, and I wouldn't abandon her now. On the 4th day, as rain streaked the hospital windows, Grandma Ellie opened her eyes while I was reading aloud from her favorite Jane Austen novel. She couldn't speak. The stroke had taken that from her, but her gaze was clear and focused. With tremendous effort, she moved her right hand, the one less affected by the stroke, and pointed weakly toward her purse that I'd brought from her cottage. "Do you need something from your bag?" I asked, reaching for the worn leather handbag she'd carried for as long as I could remember. She blinked once. Yes, our newly established communication system. Inside the purse was her wallet, a handkerchief, reading glasses, and a small key that I recognized as belonging to her personal desk at home. She pointed to the key, then to me, her gaze intense and urgent. "You want me to take this?" I confirmed. Another blink. "Your desk at home? You want me to check it?" Blink. "I will, Grandma. I promise." She relaxed visibly, her mission accomplished. That night, she slipped into a coma. 2 days later, with her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed, Eleanor Winters took her last breath. The days that followed passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and condolences. My mother threw herself into planning a service that would befit a Winters, more concerned with the guest list and refreshments than with honoring the woman her mother-in-law had actually been. My father retreated into work, his grief manifesting as irritability and impatience. Amanda played the role of bereaved granddaughter perfectly, her designer black dress and tasteful makeup presenting exactly the right image of dignified sorrow. I moved through it all in a fog, functioning on autopilot as I helped clean out Grandma Ellie's cottage and sat through the elaborate service that bore little resemblance to the simple woman I had loved. It wasn't until the evening after the funeral, when the last casserole-bearing neighbor had left and the house was finally quiet, that I remembered the key. Grandma Ellie's cottage was dark and still as I let myself in. The real estate agent my father had immediately contacted had already placed a "coming soon" sign in the front yard, eager to list the property while the market was strong. Inside, many of her belongings had already been boxed up or claimed by various family members. Amanda had taken the antique silver service despite never having shown any interest in it before. My mother had claimed the good china. No one had wanted Grandma's gardening books or her collection of seed catalogs, so those at least were still on the shelves where she'd left them. Her desk stood in the corner of the living room, a simple oak piece with 3 drawers, nothing fancy or particularly valuable. The key turned smoothly in the lock of the center drawer. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Grandma Ellie's precise handwriting, along with a flash drive. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope and began to read. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have remembered the key. I've always known you were the one who truly listened. I've watched you grow from a thoughtful child into a compassionate woman of substance and principle. You've built your life on your own terms, despite the pressures and expectations placed upon you. I couldn't be prouder of the path you've chosen. Your father and sister have never understood that there are different kinds of strength in this world. They measure success in dollars and influence, in the ability to bend others to their will. You measure it in independence, in integrity, in the courage to stand apart when necessary. The flash drive contains documents you'll need for what comes next. Martin Abernathy at Coastal Trust has a copy of everything as well. He's expecting your call. Remember what I've taught you, Emily. Money is a tool, not a master. Use it wisely, use it kindly, and never apologize for having principles that others lack. All my love, Grandma Ellie. I sat at her desk for a long time, the letter in my hands, tears blurring my vision. Even now, even gone, she had found a way to reach out to me, to let me know I wasn't alone. The flash drive rested, heavy in my palm. I should have plugged it in immediately, examined its contents, followed Grandma Ellie's instructions to contact this Martin Abernathy person. But something held me back, a strange apprehension mixing with my grief. Instead, I slipped both the letter and the drive into my pocket and wandered through the cottage one last time. The real estate agent had already placed "coming soon" signs in the yard. My father was wasting no time liquidating Grandma's modest property. In the kitchen, I ran my fingers over the worn countertop where she'd taught me to roll out pie crust. In the sunroom, I settled briefly into her reading chair, surrounded by the gardening magazines and financial journals that had occupied her quiet afternoons. The cottage felt hollow now, its soul departed with its owner. I gathered the few remaining items that held personal meaning: her favorite teacup, a handwritten recipe book, the small watercolor of Maine coastline that had hung beside her bed. No one else would notice these things were missing. No one else would value them anyway. On the drive back to Boston, an unexpected text came through from Amanda. Dinner at my place next Thursday, 7 p.m. Important family discussion. I frowned. At the message. Amanda never invited me to anything, certainly not to her sleek downtown condo where she entertained Dad's business associates and her Harvard friends. My sister and I hadn't had a meaningful conversation in years. Whatever this important family discussion entailed, I doubted it would benefit me. After a moment's hesitation, I texted back, "Can't Thursday. Work commitment." It wasn't entirely a lie. I did have client files to review, though nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. Her response came immediately. "Friday then. Non-negotiable, Emily. Dad insists." That made more sense. Not a genuine invitation from my sister, but a summons from my father. My instinct was to refuse outright, to maintain the careful distance I'd established from my family's dynamics. But curiosity nibbled at the edges of my resolve. What could be so important that my presence was non-negotiable? "Fine. Friday, at 7, I replied tersely. Back in my apartment, I finally plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It contained 3 folders: financial records, personal correspondence, and "for Emily only." I opened the last one first. Inside was a video file dated just 3 months ago, before Grandma's stroke. When I clicked on it, her face filled my screen, her eyes bright and alert, her silver hair neatly styled as always. "Emily," she began. Without preamble, "if you're watching this, then you've found the key and read my letter. What I'm about to tell you may come as a shock, but I've thought carefully about this decision, and I believe it's the right one." She shifted slightly in her chair, the bookshelves of her study visible behind her. "For the past 30 years, I've maintained a separate set of investments independent from those your father manages through Winters Financial. He believes he controls all my assets, but in truth, he oversees less than a quarter of what I've built." I gasped aloud. My father, the domineering CEO of Winters Financial, had made it clear throughout my childhood that Grandma's finances were under his expert management. The idea that she'd been maintaining a secret portfolio for decades was astonishing. "Your grandfather left me well provided for," she continued, "and I've grown those resources carefully over time. The statements in the financial records folder will show you exactly what I've built. Investments focused on sustainable companies, ethical practices, and long-term stability rather than short-term gains." She leaned forward slightly, her expression intensifying. "I've made you the sole beneficiary of these assets, Emily. Not your father, not Amanda. You. The total value is approximately $18 million in investments, plus property holdings in Vermont and Maine worth another $4 million. I nearly choked. $22 million? The number was incomprehensible. I'd built my career helping middle-income clients plan for retirement, focusing on financial literacy and practical strategies rather than wealth management. The modest inheritance I'd expected from Grandma might have helped me buy a small house someday. But $22 million? That was life-changing, identity-altering money. I know this comes as a surprise, Grandma continued, as if anticipating my shock. You might wonder why I've chosen you, rather than dividing these assets between my grandchildren or leaving them to your father. The answer is simple. I've watched all three of you carefully over the years. I've seen how Richard's relationship with money has corrupted his values, how Amanda has absorbed his belief that wealth is a measure of worth rather than a tool for good. She smiled gently. And I've watched you forge your own path, choosing education based on interest rather than prestige, building a career focused on helping others achieve security rather than maximizing your own gain. You understand what money is for, Emily. You see it clearly, as I've tried to do. Grandma's expression grew more serious. I've arranged everything legally. Martin Abernathy has been my attorney for decades, managing these affairs separately from the family's usual legal team. The will is ironclad, with contingencies for any challenges your father might mount. She sighed slightly. And he will challenge it, Emily. Make no mistake. Richard has spent his entire adult life believing he would control my estate after my passing. When he discovers I've placed it beyond his reach, and worse, in the hands of the daughter he's consistently undervalued, his reaction will be explosive. That was an understatement. My father's temper was legendary when crossed. His vindictiveness toward anyone who thwarted his plans even more so. You'll need allies, Grandma continued. Martin will be your strongest. He knows the legal landscape and has all the documentation required to defend my wishes. But there are others who can help you navigate what's coming. People named in the personal correspondence folder who share my concerns about your father's business practices and ethics. She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. Emily, this inheritance isn't just about providing for your future. It's about reclaiming the Winters legacy from the path your father has taken it down. In the financial records folder, you'll find documentation of practices at Winters Financial that trouble me deeply. Practices that prioritize profit over people, growth over responsibility. My stomach tightened. Was my grandmother suggesting that my father's company, the crown jewel of his identity, was engaged in questionable activities? I'm not asking you to expose or destroy what your father has built, she clarified, as if reading my thoughts. I'm simply giving you the resources and information to create an alternative, to show what the Winters name could stand for instead. She smiled again, warmth crinkling the corners of her eyes. You have always been stronger than anyone in this family recognized, including yourself. You have the intelligence, the integrity, and now the resources to make choices that could benefit many beyond yourself. I trust you completely with this responsibility. The video ended with her looking directly into the camera, her expression filled with a confidence in me that I'd rarely experienced from anyone else in my family. I sat motionless, struggling to process everything I'd just learned. Part of Me wanted to immediately call Martin Abernathy to verify that this wasn't some elaborate misunderstanding. Another part wanted to ignore the flash drive entirely, to pretend I'd never found the key or read the letter. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built carefully, deliberately, free from my family's suffocating expectations. $22 million would change everything, especially if it came with the hurricane of my father's wrath. After several minutes of internal debate, I opened the financial records folder. It contained meticulous documentation of Grandma's separate portfolio, decades of statements, investment choices, growth projections. True to her word, she had focused on companies with strong environmental and social governance records, avoiding the higher risk, higher return investments my father typically favored. But it was a subfolder labeled Winter's Financial Concerns that sent a chill down my spine. Inside were dozens of documents, some appearing to be internal company memos that Grandma shouldn't have had access to. They detailed practices that ranged from ethically questionable to potentially illegal, pressure tactics used on elderly clients, misleading fee structures, investments in industries that caused significant social harm, while being presented to clients as sustainable. Most disturbing was a series of emails between my father and the company's legal team discussing how to ensure that certain practices remained technically compliant while skirting the spirit of financial regulations. The most recent email was dated just 6 months ago. How had Grandma obtained these documents? Had someone inside the company been sharing information with her? And what did she expect me to do with this knowledge? My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Dad says, "To confirm Friday dinner, don't be late." I stared at the message, suddenly understanding the timing of this family discussion. The funeral had been 3 weeks ago. Probate would be underway. My father must have discovered by now that Grandma's estate wasn't flowing through the channels he'd expected. He was gathering the family to address this unexpected development, unaware of just how extensive the situation actually was. I texted back a simple "confirmed," and then immediately called the number for Martin Abernathy that Grandma had provided in her letter. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying a slight Maine accent. "Abernathy Legal Services." "Mr. Abernathy, this is Emily Winters, Eleanor Winters' granddaughter." "Ms. Winters," he replied warmly. "I've been expecting your call. First, please accept my condolences on your grandmother's passing. She was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I said. I've just reviewed the flash drive she left for me." "I see." His tone shifted slightly, becoming more formal. "Then you're aware of your grandmother's decisions regarding her estate?" "Yes, and I'm still trying to process it all. Is it really? I mean, she mentioned $22 million. That can't be right, can it? Your grandmother was an exceptionally astute investor, Ms. Winters. The valuation of $22. $3 million is current as of last month's assessment. If anything, it may have appreciated slightly since then." I took a deep breath. "And she really left all of it to me? Not to my father or split between her grandchildren?" "That is correct. Eleanor was very clear about her wishes. The estate is to pass to you in its entirety, with small personal bequests to other family members and friends that don't substantially impact the main holdings. My father will contest it," I said, echoing Grandma's warning. "We anticipate that," Martin replied calmly. "Your grandmother and I spent considerable time ensuring the will is legally unassailable. She was of sound mind. Her intentions are clearly documented, and the estate planning was executed with meticulous attention to detail. Any challenge would be unlikely to succeed." "There's something else," I continued, lowering my voice though I was alone in my apartment. "The flash drive contains documents about Winter's financial, internal communications, memos about questionable practices. How did she get those?" There was a slight pause before Martin answered. I believe your grandmother had sources within the company who shared her concerns about certain business practices. She never revealed their identities to me, and I didn't ask. Her interest was not in causing scandal, but in having documentation if it ever became necessary. Necessary for what? That, Ms. Winters, is a question only you can answer now. Eleanor believed in your judgment. She provided the information and resources. How you choose to use them is entirely your decision. We arranged to meet in person the following week at his office in Portland. As I hung up, my gaze fell on Amanda's. Text message again. Friday dinner. My father would be expecting answers about Grandma's will. Answers I now had, but which would detonate our already fragile family dynamics. I spent the next 3 days in a state of distracted anxiety, going through the motions at work while my mind continuously circled back to the flash drive locked in my desk drawer at home. I reviewed the contents each evening, familiarizing myself with the extent of Grandma's holdings and the troubling information about Winter's financial. I also explored the personal correspondence folder, which contained emails between Grandma and various financial experts, ethicists, and former employees of my father's firm who had left due to concerns about its practices. Friday arrived with gloomy weather matching my mood, a chilly spring rain that soaked through my shoes as I made my way from the subway to Amanda's luxury high-rise in the financial district. The doorman recognized my name and directed me to the penthouse elevator, which required a special key card he provided. Amanda's condo occupied the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Boston Harbor, now obscured by sheets of rain. The space was immaculate and impersonal, professionally decorated in shades of gray and white, with abstract art that perfectly matched the furniture but conveyed no discernible personality or warmth. My sister greeted me with air kisses near my cheeks, careful not to make actual contact. Emily, you're here. Good. Dad and Mom just arrived. She looked exactly as she always did. Expensively tailored clothes, perfect hair and makeup, the polished facade that had been crafted through years of our parents' focused attention and investment. But there was something different in her eyes, attention, perhaps even fear that I hadn't observed before. What's this about, Amanda? I asked quietly as she took my damp coat. Just a family discussion, she said, her tone artificially light. Nothing to worry about. The living room presented a tableau that might have been comical if it weren't so fraught with unspoken tension. My father stood by the windows, drink in hand, glowering at the storm as if personally offended by its existence. My mother perched on the edge of a designer sofa, her posture rigid, a barely touched glass of white wine on the coffee table before her. Neither turned as I entered. Emily's here, Amanda announced unnecessarily, gesturing me toward an armchair opposite our parents. My father finally turned, his expression unreadable. Sit down, Emily. We need to discuss your grandmother's will. No greeting, no pretense of family warmth. At least he was being direct. I sat, declining Amanda's offer of wine. I wanted complete clarity for whatever was coming. There seems to be some confusion about Mother's estate, my father continued, his voice controlled but with an underlying edge of anger. The family attorney informs me that her will has been changed, directing assets to some unknown lawyer in Portland rather than through Winter's Financial as arranged. I nodded, saying nothing. His jaw tightened at my lack of response. Did you know about this? I only learned about it after her death, I answered truthfully. Grandma left me a letter and some information. What kind of information? He demanded. I chose my words carefully. She explained that she had made separate estate arrangements through her own attorney, Martin Abernathy. And did this explanation mention why she would disregard decades of family financial planning to place her assets with an unknown provincial lawyer? His tone made clear what he thought of Martin Abernathy, sight unseen. She wanted to direct her estate in specific ways, I said, deliberately vague. She felt Mr. Abernathy was best positioned to execute her wishes. My father set his drink, down with unnecessary force. This is absurd. Mother had no reason to make separate arrangements. I've managed her investments successfully for 30 years. This Abernathy person has clearly taken advantage of an elderly woman's confusion to redirect assets for his own benefit. I bristled at the suggestion. Grandma was perfectly lucid, Dad. She knew exactly what she was doing. And how would you know that? He snapped. Were you somehow involved in this secret rearrangement of her affairs? No, but because if you were, he continued, voice rising, it would constitute undue influence, and we would have grounds to contest any changes to her will. Was that your plan, Emily? To manipulate your grandmother into changing her will to benefit you? The accusation hung in the air, so outlandish yet delivered with such conviction that for a moment I could only stare at him in disbelief. Richard, my mother murmured, placing a restraining hand on his arm. Let's not jump to conclusions. He shook her off, eyes fixed on me. Well, what do you have to say for yourself? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had nothing to do with Grandma's estate planning. I knew nothing about it until after she died. But she did leave me a letter explaining her decisions, and they were made with complete clarity and purpose. And what exactly were these decisions? My father pressed. The moment of truth had arrived. I could attempt to deflect, to delay the inevitable explosion. But sooner or later, my father would discover the full truth. Better to control the narrative now than be caught in evasions later. Grandma maintained separate investments outside of Winter's Financial, I said evenly. She left those assets to me. A stunned silence followed this statement. Amanda's eyes widened in shock. My mother's hand flew to her throat in her characteristic gesture of distress. My father recovered first, his laugh sharp and dismissive. That's ridiculous. Mother had no separate investments. Everything she had came through her marriage to my father and was managed by Winter's Financial after his death. That's not accurate, I countered, surprising myself with my steady tone. Grandma built a substantial portfolio independent of the family firm. She made different investment choices than you would have, focusing on ethical companies and sustainable practices. And I suppose this mythical portfolio is what she left to you? He scoffed. How convenient. It's not mythical, Dad. It's worth approximately $22 million. The words landed like a physical blow. My father's face drained of color. Amanda made a small, choked sound. My mother whispered, "Oh my God." 22 million? My father repeated, his voice suddenly hoarse. That's impossible. Mother didn't have that kind of money. She did, I said simply. She built it carefully over decades. And yes, she left it all to me. The stillness that followed was absolute, like the breathless moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I waited, watching emotions chase across my father's face. Disbelief, confusion, and finally, the darkening flush of fury I'd witnessed countless times throughout my childhood. This is fraud, he declared, voice vibrating with rage. Mother would never bypass her own son to leave her estate to. He stopped himself, but the unspoken assessment of my worth hung clearly in the air. To me? I finished for him. To the granddaughter who visited her weekly, who listened to her stories and her advice, who shared her values about money and its purpose. Yes, she would, and she did. Amanda finally found her voice. But why only you? Why not both of us? We're both her grandchildren. There was genuine hurt beneath the indignation in her tone, and for a moment I felt a flash of sympathy. Amanda had been raised to believe her superior status in the family was natural and deserved. This direct challenge to that narrative must be disorienting. It wasn't about favoritism, I explained, trying to soften my tone. Grandma believed I would use the money in ways that aligned with her values. It was about purpose, not preference. What an absolute crock, my father spat. Mother's values were family legacy and financial security, the very things I've built my career preserving and expanding. If she had concerns about how her assets would be managed, she would have come to me directly, not engaged in this cloak and dagger nonsense with some backwater lawyer. I thought of the documents on the flash drive detailing Winter's financials, ethical shortcuts, and client manipulation tactics. I think Grandma had specific reasons for keeping her decisions private. Something in my tone must have alerted him. His eyes narrowed. What exactly did Mother share with you, Emily? Besides this fairy tale about secret millions? I hesitated, uncertain how far to push this confrontation. The documents about Winter's financial were a nuclear option I wasn't ready to deploy, especially not without consulting Martin Abernathy about potential legal implications. She shared her philosophy about wealth and responsibility, I said carefully. Her belief that money should be a force for positive change, not just for accumulation or status. Spare me the platitudes, my father snapped. Mother was no naive, idealist. She understood the realities of wealth preservation and growth. Whatever notions you think she endorsed were likely fabrications meant to justify this theft of family assets. It's not theft when they were hers to give, I replied, my own anger finally rising. And she wasn't confused or manipulated. She made these arrangements years ago, with full legal documentation and clear reasoning. My father leaned forward, his expression hardening. Let me be absolutely clear, Emily. I will contest this will. I will use every legal resource available to ensure that Mother's estate is distributed as it should have been, through proper family channels, managed by Winter's Financial. If you think you're walking away with $22 million based on some half-baked ethical justification, you are sorely mistaken. You'll lose, I said simply. Grandma anticipated that you'd challenge her decisions. She prepared for it. We'll see about that, he replied coldly. I've been managing wealth and navigating legal complexities since before you were born. This provincial lawyer of hers is no match for the team I'll assemble. Amanda, who had been watching this exchange with visible anxiety, suddenly interjected. Wait, just wait. There has to be a reasonable solution here. She turned to me, her expression a studied blend of sisterly concern and pragmatism. Emily, surely Grandma would want the family to remain united. Whatever her intentions, couldn't we find a compromise? Perhaps a more equitable distribution? I recognized the tactic immediately. Amanda had always been the diplomat in family conflicts, the one who found the middle ground that inevitably tilted in her favor. But this wasn't a disagreement about Thanksgiving plans or vacation destinations. This was Grandma's deliberate, carefully documented final wish. It's not mine to compromise, I said firmly. Grandma made her decision after decades of observation and consideration. I intend to honor it exactly as she intended. So that's it? My father said, voice dangerously quiet. You'll take Mother's money and turn your back on family obligation? On the legacy I've spent my entire career building? I'm not turning my back on anything, I replied. I'm moving forward with the trust Grandma placed in me. He stood abruptly, straightening his suit jacket with sharp, controlled movements. This discussion is over for now. Amanda, thank you for hosting, though I've lost my appetite for dinner. Emily? He fixed me with a hard stare. Expect to hear from our attorneys. This is far from settled. My mother rose automatically when he did, her expression distressed but resigned. She hadn't spoken a word during the entire confrontation, maintaining her lifelong position on the sidelines of family conflict. After they left, Amanda and I remained in awkward silence for several moments. Finally, she sighed heavily and moved to the bar cart to refill her drink. Well, that went about as expected, she said, a brittleness in her tone that hadn't been there before. You do realize Dad will make this as difficult and painful as possible? I know, I acknowledged. But I'm prepared for that. She studied me over the rim of her glass. Are you? Really? Because Dad doesn't just fight to win, Emily. He fights to destroy. You've never been on the receiving end of that because you've never had anything he wanted before. There was something almost like concern in her voice. The first genuine emotion I'd detected from my sister in years. I didn't ask for this position, I said honestly. But now that I'm in it, I'm going to honor what Grandma wanted. Amanda shook her head slightly. You know what I don't understand? Why Grandma would deliberately set up this conflict. If she cared about you, why put you directly in Dad's crosshairs? And if she cared about family harmony, why create this situation at all? It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly since viewing Grandma's video. I think she believed, some things are more important than artificial harmony, I answered slowly. That sometimes meaningful change requires disruption. Change? What kind of change? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about the documents concerning Winter's financial. Amanda had worked at the firm since graduating from business school, following directly in our father's footsteps. Her loyalty had always been unquestioned. Grandma had concerns about certain aspects of the family business, I said carefully, about its direction and some of its practices. Amanda's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of something, recognition, worry. Crossing her features before her polished facade reasserted itself. What kind of concerns? She asked, her tone deliberately casual. I'm still processing all the information she left, I deflected. But I think she saw this inheritance as an opportunity to establish a different kind of Winter's legacy. One focused more on positive impact than pure profit. Amanda gave a short, humorless laugh. Good luck with that. Dad will fight you on the money, but if you're planning some kind of crusade against Winter's financial itself, he'll absolutely scorched earth you. I never said anything about a crusade. She fixed me with a searching look. Didn't you? Because that whole speech about meaningful change and different legacy sounds like someone preparing for battle. She set her glass down with a decisive click. Let me give you some free advice, sister to sister. Take whatever settlement Dad's lawyers offer you. Walk away with a few million and your life intact. Don't try to challenge the existing order. You'll only destroy yourself in the process. Her words carried an undertone that suggested more than sisterly concern, almost like warning. Before I could probe further, my phone buzzed with a text. Message. I glanced down to see Martin Abernathy's name. Richard Winters just called my office. Extremely hostile. We should move our meeting up. Are you available tomorrow? 10 a.m.? I texted back a quick confirmation, then looked up to find Amanda watching me with an unreadable expression. Dad's lawyers? She asked. No, Grandma's attorney. We're meeting tomorrow. She nodded slowly. Emily, whatever you're planning, whatever Grandma set in motion, just be careful. You don't know all the players in this game yet. What does that mean? Amanda opened her mouth as if to explain, then seemed to think better of it. Nothing. Just, family dynamics are complicated. More complicated than you might realize from your position on the periphery all these years. That stung, despite its essential truth. I had maintained my distance from family politics, focusing on building my independent life while Amanda remained firmly enmeshed in the Winters ecosystem. I should go, I said, rising and reaching for my coat. Thanks for hosting this delightful family gathering. Amanda didn't smile at my attempt at humor. Instead, she walked me to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. One more thing, she said, her voice lower now. If Grandma really did leave you documents about Winter's financial, be very selective about who you share them with. Not everyone who claims to be on your side actually is. Before I could ask what she meant, she opened the door, effectively ending our conversation. I stepped into the hallway, more confused than when I'd arrived. Was Amanda trying to help me or manipulate me? Warning me or threatening me? The line between ally and adversary had suddenly blurred. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, I realized that Grandma's inheritance had instantly transformed me from family afterthought to central figure in a drama I didn't fully understand. The flash drive in my apartment now felt like a ticking bomb rather than a gift, loaded with information that could destroy careers, relationships, and possibly even the company that bore our family name. Whatever game was being played, I had just become a key piece on the board, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing crucial information about the other players, including, potentially, my own sister. The rain had intensified when I emerged from Amanda's building, but I barely noticed the soaking as I walked toward the subway, my mind racing with questions. Why had Grandma really chosen me as her heir? What was Amanda's cryptic warning really about? And most pressingly, what exactly was I supposed to do with the damning information about Winter's financial that was now in my possession? By the time I reached my apartment, I had made one decision. Before meeting Martin Abernathy tomorrow, I needed to review every document on that flash drive again. This time, not just as Grandma's heir, but as someone potentially stepping into a minefield of family secrets and corporate malfeasance. Whatever came next would depend on my complete understanding of what Grandma had entrusted to me, not just the money, but the truth behind it. The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery maples, sending a shower of crimson leaves spiraling down around me. I remained by Grandma Ellie's grave for nearly an hour, telling her about the fellowship program I'd established in her name, the community financial literacy workshops I'd begun teaching on weekends, and my tentative reconnection with Amanda. Though the marble headstone offered no response, I felt her presence in the crisp air, in the determined dandelion pushing up beside her grave marker, resilient and unassuming, just as she had been. As I was leaving, my phone vibrated with a text from Amanda. Wedding plans moving forward? Dinner next weekend to discuss? Just us. I smiled slightly, still adjusting to this new, more thoughtful version of my sister. We'd met for coffee 3 times since that first rainy afternoon, each conversation a careful exploration of terrain neither of us knew how to navigate. There had been awkward silences and occasional retreats to old patterns, but also moments of surprising honesty. During our last meeting, Amanda had admitted she'd always been jealous of my academic abilities. "You made everything look so effortless," she'd said. "School, independence, knowing who you were. I always felt like I was performing, getting the right grades to please Dad, wearing the right clothes to impress Mom's friends, saying the right things to keep my position. It wasn't effortless," I'd countered. "It was just necessary. I didn't have anyone making the path smooth for me. I had to figure things out on my own." She'd nodded slowly. "I'm starting to understand that having everything handed to you isn't the advantage I always thought it was." I texted back, "Dinner sounds good." "My place? I make a decent risotto." Her response came quickly. "I'd like that. Saturday at 7? The months leading up to Amanda's wedding passed with surprising swiftness. Winter settled over Boston, transforming the city with a pristine blanket of snow that softened its hard edges. I found myself busier than I'd ever been, dividing my time between my clients at Meridian Advisors, the newly established Eleanor Winters Foundation, and the tentative rebuilding of my relationship with Amanda. The foundation had quickly become my passion. Using a significant portion of my inheritance, I had assembled a small team of financial experts, educators, and community advocates dedicated to promoting financial literacy and ethical investment practices. We focused particularly on neighborhoods and populations traditionally excluded from financial education, offering workshops on budgeting, credit management, and small business planning in community centers and public libraries throughout New England. Martin Abernathy had agreed to serve on our board of directors, bringing with him decades of wisdom and an intimate understanding of Grandma Ellie's vision. Together, we had begun the careful work of addressing the Winters legacy, not through public revelations about my great-grandfather's misdeeds, which would serve no constructive purpose now, but through targeted support for communities harmed by predatory financial practices. With every workshop we conducted, every small business loan we facilitated, every scholarship we funded, I felt Grandma Ellie's approving presence. This was the work she had prepared me for, the purpose behind her careful planning. Where once the Winters name had been associated with wealth accumulation at any cost, we were slowly beginning to redefine it through service and education. My relationship with Amanda continued to evolve, sometimes unevenly, but with steady progress. Our Saturday dinner had become something of a monthly tradition, alternating between my brownstone and her downtown loft. During these evenings, we gradually filled in the gaps of our separate childhoods, discovering shared memories that we had processed entirely differently, and building a foundation of genuine understanding. Do you remember that summer in Nantucket? When I was 12 and you were 15, she asked one snowy evening as we shared a bottle of wine by my fireplace. When Dad took us sailing on that ridiculous yacht he'd chartered to impress the Morgensterns? I laughed, the memory suddenly vivid. How could I forget? He was trying so hard to prove he knew what he was doing that he nearly capsized us in the harbor. Amanda smiled, swirling her wine thoughtfully. I always thought you stayed below. Deck that whole trip because you were seasick. Mom kept saying, "Poor Emily, she just doesn't have the constitution for sailing." I wasn't seasick at all, I confessed. I just couldn't stand watching Dad posture for his business associates. Every time Mr. Morgenstern corrected Dad's sailing terminology, I could see that vein throbbing in his temple, the one that always meant an explosion was coming. I hid out with a book instead. I envied that about you, Amanda said quietly. Your ability to just remove yourself from the performance. I was on deck the entire time, laughing at Dad's terrible jokes, pretending I found the Morgenstern boys fascinating, wearing that ridiculous white outfit Mom had bought specifically for the occasion. I thought you enjoyed all that. Shadidai shook her head, a rueful smile playing at her lips. I was terrified the entire time. Terrified of saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong expression, disappointing Dad in front of people who mattered to him. Even at 12, I understood that. We were props in his carefully staged production of successful businessman with perfect family. But these conversations revealed a sister I had never truly known. A young woman who had been as constrained by our father's expectations as I had been excluded by them. Neither of us had escaped the Winters family dynamic unscathed. We had simply developed different coping mechanisms. My withdrawal and independence had been mirrored by Amanda's performance and conformity. As February arrived with record-breaking cold, Amanda's wedding plans hit an unexpected complication. My father, after initially threatening to boycott the event entirely, had suddenly reversed course and was now insisting on a larger role in the planning. He wants to invite the governor, Amanda told me during an emergency coffee meeting, her expression a mixture of frustration and residual anxiety. The actual governor of Massachusetts, who he barely knows, plus half the Boston financial community and 3 Cabot cousins who haven't spoken to Henry's family in years. Let me guess, the Cabot cousins with connections to the venture capital firm he's been courting, I suggested. She nodded miserably. Exactly. He keeps talking about maximizing the opportunity and strategic guest placement. It's like he's planning a corporate merger, not his daughter's wedding. What does Henry say? Henry suggested we elope to Vermont this weekend and tell everyone after the fact. She smiled weakly. He's only half joking. The thing is, Emily, I do want an actual wedding. Not Dad's networking event, but a real celebration with people who care about us. Is that too much to ask? I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Of course not. This is your wedding, Amanda, not Dad's. You've already stood your ground once. You can do it again. It's exhausting, she sighed. Every boundary I set, he finds a new way to push past it. Last week, he surprised us by placing a deposit on a yacht for the rehearsal dinner after we'd already booked the restaurant in Provincetown. When I told him we couldn't accept, he acted wounded, said he was just trying to give his only daughter the celebration she deserves. But I recognized the manipulation tactic immediately. Our father had perfected the art of presenting control as generosity, making any resistance seem like ingratitude. He's testing you, I said gently. Seeing how firm your new boundaries really are. The question is, what do you truly want for your wedding day? Amanda considered this, absently turning her engagement ring. I want what Henry and I planned, a meaningful ceremony with people who actually know us and care about us. A celebration that reflects who we are, not who Dad thinks we should be. She straightened her shoulders, resolve hardening her expression. And I'm going to have it, even if that means uninviting my own father. That evening, she called to tell me she'd done exactly that, informed our father that his attempts to commandeer the wedding were unwelcome, and that while she hoped he would attend as her father, he was welcome only if he could respect the event she and Henry had designed. He threatened to cut me off financially, she reported, her voice remarkably steady. I reminded him I haven't taken money from him since I left the firm last year. He seemed genuinely shocked, like he couldn't comprehend that I've been supporting myself. How do you feel? I asked, concerned about the emotional toll this confrontation must have taken. Surprisingly okay, she answered after a thoughtful pause. Lighter somehow, like I've put down a weight I've been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. The aftermath of Amanda's stand played out predictably. Our father retreated into icy silence, communicating only through our mother, who called Amanda daily with escalating reports of his wounded feelings and dire predictions about the social consequences of her decision. The pressure grew as the June wedding date approached, with extended family members enlisted to apply additional guilt. Through it all, Amanda maintained her resolve with a steadiness that impressed me. The once malleable sister who had shaped herself to our father's expectations was gone, replaced by a woman who had discovered her own voice and the courage to use it. Grandma would be proud of you, I told her one afternoon as we addressed invitations at my dining room table. This kind of independence is exactly what she valued. Amanda looked up, surprised. You think so? I always felt she was disappointed in me, that she saw me as Dad's puppet. She saw you more clearly than that, I assured her, thinking of the journals. She understood the position you were in, the pressure you faced, but she always believed you had the capacity to break free when you were ready. I wish I'd known her better, Amanda said softly. Really known her, I mean. In some ways, you're getting to know her now, I observed. Through the choices you're making, the stand you're taking, you're more like her than you realize. Spring arrived gradually, warming the city and bringing fresh energy to the wedding preparations. As maid of honor, I threw myself into supporting Amanda's vision. A simple, elegant ceremony at a historic inn on Cape Cod, followed by a reception that would focus on meaningful connection rather than social display. To my surprise, I found myself genuinely enjoying the process. The sisters who had once existed in separate orbits were now collaborating daily, discovering shared tastes and complementary skills. Amanda had an eye for aesthetics that I lacked, while I contributed organizational precision that kept the planning on track. Together, we created something neither of us could have managed alone. My mother continued her anxious mediation between Amanda and our father, calling with increasingly desperate appeals for reconciliation as the wedding date approached. He's bought a new suit, she reported breathlessly in early May. Handmade. In Italy. Surely that means he's planning to attend. If he wants to attend, all he has to do is call me directly and agree to respect our plans, Amanda repeated for what felt like the 100th time. I'm not negotiating through intermediaries, Mom. Not anymore. The call that finally came, however, wasn't from our father. It was from Henry's mother, Catherine, who had become an unexpected ally throughout the planning process. Her warm, practical approach had been a revelation to Amanda, who had never experienced maternal guidance untinged by social climbing or appearance management. "Richard called James last night," Catherine told Amanda during a three-way call that included me. James was Henry's father, a pediatric surgeon with no connection to the financial world my father inhabited. He wanted to discuss some sort of joint father of the couple toast, something about presenting a united front about the merger of families. Amanda and I exchanged looks of disbelief through the phone. "What did James say?" Amanda asked cautiously. He was rather confused, to be honest. He told Richard that he wasn't planning any formal remarks beyond welcoming everyone, and that he viewed the wedding as a celebration, not a business opportunity. Catherine's voice held a mixture of bewilderment and amusement. Richard seemed quite put out. After Catherine hung up, Amanda buried her face in her hands. "He just can't help himself, can he? Even now, he's trying to turn my wedding into a performance." "What are you going to do?" I asked. She looked up, resolution clear in her eyes. "I'm going to call him myself, directly. No more messages through, 'Mom,' no more passive-aggressive moves, just honest communication, once and for all." The conversation that followed was one I witnessed only Amanda's side of, as she paced my living room with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice remained calm but firm as she laid out her expectations clearly. If he wanted to attend her wedding, he would be welcomed as her father, not as Richard Winters, CEO of Winters Financial. There would be no business discussions, no networking, opportunities, no strategic seating arrangements, just a father celebrating his daughter's marriage. When she hung up, her hands were shaking slightly, but her expression was peaceful. "He's coming," she said simply. And for the first time in my life, I think he actually heard me. The first weekend in June dawned clear and perfect, with the kind of crystalline blue sky that seems exclusive to Cape Cod. The historic inn Amanda and Henry had chosen overlooked a small, protected cove where fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings. The ceremony would take place in the garden, with the reception following on a tented patio facing the water. As maid of honor, I had arrived the day before to help with final preparations. Now, in a quiet upstairs room with windows open to the sea breeze, I helped Amanda prepare for her wedding day. "I can't believe it's finally happening," she said, sitting at the vanity as I arranged her hair in a simple, elegant updo adorned with small white flowers. "Sometimes I feel like I've lived two completely different lives. Everything before I stood up to Dad, and everything after." "You're still the same person," I reminded her, securing a final pin. "You've just finally allowed yourself to be authentic rather than performative." She caught my eye in the mirror. "I learned that from you, you know. Watching you build your own life without seeking his approval, it showed me it was possible." I squeezed her shoulder gently. "And now you're showing me that it's possible to transform relationships that seemed beyond repair. I never thought we'd be here like this." "Neither did I." She turned to face me, taking my hands in hers. "Emily, whatever happens downstairs, today with Dad, with Mom, with anyone, I want you to know that you're my sister in a way that matters now, not just in biology. These past months of really knowing you have been a gift I never expected." Tears threatened my carefully applied makeup. "Same, Amanda. More than you know." A soft knock at the door interrupted our moment. Mom stood in the doorway looking elegant but nervous in a pale blue dress that had undoubtedly been chosen to complement rather than compete with the bridal party. "You look beautiful," she told Amanda, genuine emotion in her voice. Then, glancing at me with uncertainty, she added, "Both of you do." "Thank you, Mom," Amanda replied warmly. "Is everyone here?" "Yes, the guests are seated. And your father." She hesitated. He's waiting downstairs. He's been very quiet all morning." I tensed slightly, wondering if his subdued demeanor was a prelude to some last-minute attempt to assert control. "As long as he's ready to walk me down the aisle when the music starts, that's all that matters," Amanda said with remarkable composure. Mom nodded, then surprised us both by adding, "I'm proud of you, Amanda, for making this day your own." Her gaze shifted to include me. "Of both of you, actually, for becoming such strong women even when your father and I didn't always make that easy." It was the closest thing to an apology or acknowledgement of the past that she had ever offered. Amanda and I exchanged a startled glance, but before either of us could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared to announce it was almost time. The ceremony itself was everything Amanda and Henry had envisioned: intimate, heartfelt, focused on their commitment rather than spectacle. Standing beside my sister as she spoke her vows, I felt a surge of pride in the woman she had become, and in the relationship we had managed to build from the ruins of our fractured childhood. My father performed his role with surprising restraint, walking Amanda down the aisle with dignity and appropriate emotion. During the reception that followed, he remained subdued, abstaining from his usual networking and instead engaging primarily with family members he typically overlooked at gatherings. Whether this change represented genuine growth or simply strategic adaptation to Amanda's boundaries remained to be seen, but for today at least, he was allowing the focus to remain where it belonged, on the bride and groom. As the evening progressed and guests began to dance under the soft glow of string lights, I found myself seated at a quiet table overlooking the water. The sunset had painted the sky in spectacular pinks and oranges that reflected on the harbor's surface, creating a scene of perfect tranquility. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up, surprised to find my father standing beside the table, a glass of scotch in his hand. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. He sat carefully, his movements more deliberate than I remembered. Up close, I could see new lines around his eyes, a slight slackening of the once firm jaw. For the first time, I registered that my father was aging, still formidable, still commanding, but no longer invincible. "It was a beautiful ceremony," he said after a moment of silence. "Yes, it was," I agreed. "Amanda and Henry did a wonderful job planning everything." He nodded, taking a slow sip of his scotch. "Very different from what your mother and I would have arranged, but fitting for them." Coming from my father, this was a remarkable concession. "I understand you've established some sort of foundation," he continued, his tone carefully neutral, "using mother's inheritance." I tensed slightly, prepared for criticism or a renewed challenge to my stewardship of Grandma's estate. "The Eleanor Winters Foundation, yes. We focus on financial literacy and ethical investment education." To my surprise, he nodded with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Your mother mentioned you've been conducting workshops in underserved communities. That's commendable." "Thank you," I said cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. He was quiet for another moment, gazing out at the darkening harbor. When he spoke again, his voice held a note I hadn't heard before, something almost like uncertainty. "Your grandmother was always better at seeing the bigger picture than I was, at understanding that wealth brings responsibility as well as opportunity." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I've spent my career focusing on growth, on accumulation. You and Mother seem to share a different perspective." I couldn't quite believe we were having this conversation, that my father was acknowledging, even obliquely, that Grandma's financial philosophy might have merit. "Grandma believed that money was a tool, not a goal in itself," I said carefully. "She taught me that how we use our resources matters as much as how we acquire them." He absorbed this without immediate rebuttal, which itself felt like a minor miracle. Your foundation's work, it relates to this philosophy? Very much so. We're trying to democratize financial knowledge, to help people understand how money works so they can make informed decisions rather than being exploited by those who understand the system better. And is it successful? He asked. And I realized with a start that he genuinely wanted to know. We're still in the early stages, but yes, I believe we're making a difference. We've helped several small businesses secure ethical financing, assisted dozens of families in developing sustainable budgets, provided scholarships for students pursuing careers in community finance. I hesitated, then added, Grandma would have been proud of what we're accomplishing. Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps, or simply acknowledgement. Yes, I believe she would be. We lapsed into silence again, watching as Amanda and Henry moved among their guests, their happiness radiating outward like the ripples from a stone dropped in still water. I made mistakes, Emily, my father said suddenly, his voice lower than before. With you, with Amanda, with Mother. He kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if direct eye contact would make this admission impossible. I was so focused on building what my father started, on expanding the Winters legacy as I understood it, that I missed other things, important things. I sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe lest I disrupt whatever had prompted this unprecedented moment of reflection. Watching Amanda today, he continued, seeing her so centered, so clear about what she wants, it made me realize how rarely I've asked that question. What any of you actually wanted, rather than what I believed you should want. He finally turned to look at me directly. I'm beginning to wonder if Mother saw something in you that I missed entirely. Something worth investing in. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. Rather, it was an opening, a small crack in the impenetrable facade of certainty that had defined my father throughout my life. Whether it represented genuine introspection or simply resignation to circumstances he couldn't control was impossible to determine. But it was more than I had ever expected from Richard Winters. It's not too late to start asking those questions, I said gently, about what people want, what matters to them. He nodded slowly, finishing his scotch and setting the glass carefully on the table. Perhaps not. Before either of us could say more, Amanda appeared beside our table, slightly flushed from dancing and radiant with happiness. There you two are. Henry's looking for you, Dad. Something about a family photo with his parents. She glanced between us curiously. Am I interrupting something? Not at all, my father said, rising from his chair with his usual decisive movement. Just catching up with your sister. He hesitated, then added, You've created a lovely event, Amanda. You and Henry both. Her expression softened with surprise and pleasure. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. As he walked away to join the photography session, Amanda slipped into his vacated chair, kicking off her shoes with a sigh of relief. Was that an actual conversation between you and Dad, with no visible tension? On the same day that pigs, presumably, started flying? I laughed, the momentous quality of the exchange suddenly striking me as almost absurd. I think it might have been, though I wouldn't count on a complete personality transformation just yet. Baby steps, she agreed, wiggling her toes beneath the tablecloth. Hey, I've been meaning to ask you, Henry and I are thinking of buying a place after the honeymoon. Something outside the city with a bit of land. Nothing fancy, just room to breathe and maybe plant a garden someday. Would you help us look? You've got a good eye for potential. I'd love to, I said, touched by the simple, natural inclusion in this next chapter of her life. Just let me know when you're ready to start searching. We sat together in comfortable silence, watching the celebration unfold around us, Henry's, parents dancing with unexpected exuberance, Our mother engaged in animated conversation with Catherine's sister, distant relatives mingling easily with new connections. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it was genuine connection, free from the rigid performance that had characterized Winter's family gatherings for as long as I could remember. "Do you ever think about what Grandma would make of all this?" Amanda asked, gesturing broadly to encompass not just the wedding, but everything that had unfolded since her will reading. The inheritance, the foundation, you and me actually becoming friends, Dad showing signs of being human. I smiled, thinking of the journals hidden safely in my desk drawer at home. I think she orchestrated more of it than we realize. Not the specifics, maybe, but the conditions that made it all possible. What do you mean? I considered how to explain without revealing the full contents of the journals, which felt too private, too complex to share even now. Grandma understood family dynamics better than anyone I've ever known. She saw the patterns we were trapped in, the roles we'd been assigned. And I think she decided to disrupt those patterns in the only way she could, by changing the power balance, by giving me the resources to stand on equal footing with Dad for the first time in my life. And by forcing me to question everything I thought I knew about success and approval, Amanda added thoughtfully, when she left me just enough to make a point, but not enough to keep me dependent on the family system. Exactly. She created an opportunity for all of us to relate differently, to see each other more clearly. I reached across the table and squeezed my sister's hand. And look what came of it. The party continued around us, music and laughter blending with the gentle sound of waves against the shore. As midnight approached, Amanda and Henry prepared for their departure, surrounded by friends and family holding sparklers that illuminated the garden path with golden light. I stood with the other guests, watching as my sister embraced our parents, a genuine hug rather than the stiff, formal interaction that had characterized our family displays of affection in the past. When she reached me, her eyes were bright, with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered as we held each other close. "For everything." "Go be happy," I told her. "That's all the thanks I need." As their car pulled away, trailing ribbons and tin cans into the night, I found myself thinking of the final entry in Grandma Ellie's journal, written just weeks before her stroke. I don't know exactly what will unfold when I'm gone. How Richard will react to my decisions. Whether Amanda will find the courage to question the path she's been set upon. Whether Emily will embrace the responsibility I've placed in her hands. I can only create the conditions for possibility, for transformation. The rest will be up to them. What I know with certainty is this. Legacy isn't what we leave behind in material terms. It's what we nurture in those who remain. The questions, we prompt them to ask. The courage we inspire them to find. The connections we help them forge, even after we can no longer be present to witness them. In Emily, I see the capacity to transform what the Winters name has meant for generations. In Amanda, despite everything, I see the potential for authenticity waiting to be awakened. Even in Richard, my difficult, driven son, I occasionally glimpse moments of insight that give me hope he might someday recognize the limitations of the Yao, values he's embraced. I leave them not just my material possessions, but my deepest hope, that they might find their way toward genuine connection, toward purpose rooted in contribution rather than acquisition, toward the understanding that true wealth can never be measured in dollars. Standing under the star-filled Cape Cod sky, watching the taillights of my sister's car disappear down the winding road, I felt Grandma Ellie's presence as clearly as if she stood beside me. Not through supernatural intervention, but through the living legacy she had created. A legacy now embodied in the healing that had begun between Amanda and me, in the tentative opening my father had displayed, in the work of the foundation that bore her name. The inheritance she had left me wasn't just the money, the investments, the properties. It was the understanding that we are not bound by the patterns we inherit, that with courage and clarity, we can transform not just our individual lives, but the legacies we pass forward to those who follow. As I turned back toward the inn, where a few guests still lingered beneath the twinkling lights, I made a silent promise to my grandmother to continue the work she had begun, to honor her vision for what our family could become, to ensure that her final envelope contained not just revelation, but enduring transformation. In the months and years that followed, that promise would guide my choices. The Eleanor Winters Foundation would grow in impact and reach, expanding from New England to communities across the country. Amanda and Henry would find their place outside the city, creating a home where simple authenticity replaced performance and appearances. My father would never fully abandon his driven, acquisition-focused worldview, but he would gradually come to respect the different path I had chosen, eventually even contributing his expertise to certain foundation initiatives. And I would continue to discover new dimensions of the inheritance Grandma Ellie had entrusted to me, not just financial resources, but wisdom, purpose, and the courage to redefine what it meant to be a Winters. To transform a legacy of accumulation into one of contribution. To recognize that true wealth is measured not in what we possess, but in how we empower others. The last envelope, it turned out, had contained far more than any of us could have imagined on that day in the attorney's office. It had contained nothing less than the possibility of redemption, for a family, for a fortune, for a future yet to be written. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.